At IDRC, we have a mandate to promote gender equality in our research and programming, but also in our institutional policies and practices. So we are going to introduce 5 researchers from different research teams who have looked at the experiences of women and girls in various perspectives.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Nairobi office of Canada's International Development Research Centre this morning. This morning we're going to hear the journey from girlhood to womanhood and how research can help along that journey. We'll be hearing from 5 different researchers from 5 different research organizations, and I think that you will see how embedded these researchers are in the communities in which they work. They're researchers and research organizations funded by IDRC. So I hope that we each leave here this morning touched by the stories that we are going to hear and have perhaps a new insight into the journey from girlhood to womanhood. Welcome again.
Hello, everyone. Habari zenu? Bonjour. It's nice to be here with you again for an IDRC Indaba. It's always a pleasure to come here, and certainly we at the Canadian High Commission and the Government of Canada are very much value the work and research that is done by IDRC and here in the regional office in Nairobi. Thank you for including me this morning in your discussions, and I look forward to this rich and enlightening discussion. Thank you very much.
So the story of girlhood to womanhood is very interesting because sometimes we miss out on key factors. So Mozambique, for example, has a 40% rate of teenagers who get pregnant every year. And that contributes heavily to the maternal mortality and, of course, the child mortality. And one of the researchers that we're doing we're collaborating with colleagues in Maputo showed that when you analyze what are the key factors of this early marriage, they're very distinct issues. For one, if a girl gets married, then her parents don't have to feed someone else in the house, yeah? The second thing is they get income from this process. And as much as you do a community engagement process to try and advocate from the community level to ensure that girls don't get married very early, there's only so much you can do if there's a livelihood component to it. And so it's a complicated scenario because there's so many things, there's so many factors that influence what makes a girl get married early and hence how that contributes to her health. So the researchers discovered there's a new way. And the new way is each girl has to go through a process that defines that she has become a woman. Yeah? And this process is initiation. So how about looking at addressing it from an initiation point of view? So beyond just what's happening from a community approach and advocacy level, how about looking at what really happens at the initiation, right? And also then identifying how do you communicate the necessary messages to ensure that girls understand what it means to their health, parents understand what it means to their daughter's health if they get married early. So even though this is not a scope of the main research, which is primarily on maternal health, they are looking to collaborate with other people who can now bring in an education element to these young girls in Mozambique to be able to ensure that the rate at which young adolescent girls get pregnant is reduced. So you see the community approach is very important in this sense because you cannot leave or remove the girl from her community. She is part of a community. And unless you address the problem from the community, then will you help the girl. So that's our girlhood to womanhood story. Thank you.
I'll tell a story of one of our respondents. This is a true story. And this happens to be consistent across the 6 sub-Saharan African countries. A case study of a young woman in Kenya who is now only 22 years but already a mother of 3, having gone through various challenges. The name of this lady is Joanne. Joanne was very bright in primary school. She did very well. She used to be almost at the top of her class. Unfortunately, at the age of 13, she dropped out of primary school. Reason, her parents separated and she was left with her mother, who did not have a source of income. After about 1 year, the mother got depressed and she could not provide for Joanne. So Joanne could not proceed to high school, though she had enough grades or good grades to take her to high school. Joanne had to look for a job as a house help to take care of her mother and also her younger sibling. Unfortunately, she came to the city, Nairobi, and found a job as a house help. It went well for the first few months. Unfortunately, she got pregnant before she was 15 years by an older man in the city. The man refused to take responsibility. When she was 5 months pregnant, the employer noticed and told her she could not work anymore. So Joanne went back to the village. She needed to take care of her mother, her sister, and to now support her upcoming baby. Fortunately, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She started looking for casual jobs in the village because the mother was not well enough to work. And unfortunately, after 9 months, before the baby was even 6 months, she got pregnant again. This time by someone slightly older, but from the village. Fortunately, he agreed to marry her, but he had no source of income. So Joanne got married. She struggled to look for casual jobs in the village, provide for her new family because the husband was not responsible. He would drink any money that he could get. By the time she was 19, she already had a third born, another baby. So here she was, she didn't know what to do. So she thought that one of the things she could do, because she could not look for casual work anymore with 3 babies to take care of, she decided to start selling vegetables on the roadside near her house. The challenge was that she has to take care of her family of 3, she has to take care of her mother and the younger sister, and her husband was not bringing anything home. This is a very sad story of Joanne. When we talked to her and asked her, what would you have done different? She said, given the circumstances, given the poverty they had in the household when their father deserted them, she did not have any alternative. If she had a bursary, she would have continued with schooling. If she had money now, startup capital, she would start a big business and also employ someone to take care of the children so that she can concentrate on the business. But this has not been possible. Then she tells me that her classmate called James, whom she used to compete with in primary school, did so well. He never had any constraints. Now he's a medical student at one of the local universities. So she says that hopefully, because she had aspired to do a degree in medicine, she hopes that she can actually educate her children to reach to that level. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll begin by sharing a photograph that was taken by one of the women who participated in our study. We'll call the lady Maria. And the woman who took the picture explained that this young woman is working with her son, and she has a child and she's going to look for a casual job. So if you go to someone looking for a casual job while holding one hand and carrying the other on your back, no one will give you a job. So, across Africa, across the world, we do know that women shoulder a disproportionate responsibility for taking care of their young children. Now, in Africa, you find that there is actually very little research on what that impact has
on their ability to engage in the labor force. And it's because people assume that women like Maria can combine work and childcare. So for example, maybe she carries the baby on her back and she's selling produce by the road. Or they assume that women like Maria have many female relatives, aunts, grandmothers who can take care of their child while they work. But this is actually not true, and our research in Nairobi's urban informal settlements actually shows that many women have a challenge balancing childcare and work. And many of them are in fact not living close to relatives who can take care of those children. So our study, which was conducted by a team of researchers from McGill University in Canada and the African Population and Health Research Center here in Nairobi, sought to answer the question: if you provide women with affordable and quality childcare or daycare services, are they able to engage more fully in the labor force? So what did we do? We conducted a randomized control trial, an experimental study. So out of the 1,200 women who participated in our study, some of them were randomly assigned to receive a voucher, and that voucher enabled them to take their child to a daycare for a period of 12 months. The others continued with their regular childcare arrangements. And what did we find at the end? The women who received that voucher were actually working more. There were a greater proportion of them were working. Secondly, they were earning more than those who did not receive the voucher, and they were working fewer hours. So in other words, if we were to combine all this in a nutshell, giving women that access to subsidized daycare enabled them to be more fully engaged and to work productively. So what does this mean for countries? We're all working towards the Sustainable Development Goals as nations. And one of the targets in the Sustainable Development Goals is to achieve full and productive employment for all men and women and decent work for all men and women. And we are showing from this research that actually thinking about what subsidized daycare can do for women might help us achieve that goal. And that's the end of Maria's story and how we can help Maria.
We have been working with women from 3 counties in Kenya, women from Kwale on a chicken farming project, women from Bungoma mainly involved in dairy, and women from Baringo mainly involved in beekeeping. The common factors among these groups of women is that they are mainly using subsistence forms of production, and in a lot of cases they do it in a traditional way. I'm going to tell you the story of Nekesa from Bungoma County, who is one of the women we are working with in this research. Nekesa is from a relatively traditional Bungoma family that has a family productive system. She is a dairy farmer partly through support from the county government dairy project. The main issues that she faced with the other women was that the project was much more aimed at providing the dairy animal with little support on what to do. So we worked with them in improving their skills. We also worked with them in looking at ways of marketing, mainly the milk that comes from it, and in particular improving production, marketing, and whatever value addition they can add to it. From the capacity building that Nekesa went through, she was able to negotiate with her brother-in-law who had more land, and she got access to land. She grew cattle feed on this land and has been able to improve productivity of milk on her farm. She has also been able to have some surplus to be able to sell to other farmers within it. She has also been able, and also alongside other women, to benefit from peer support from men within the project who have been able to talk to fellow men to understand what the women are going through and support them, for instance, through providing more land to the women because they are the ones who own land within the traditional form. That's the end of my story.
story of Mary. Mary is a young lady. She got pregnant immediately after finishing her first degree. At the same time, she got admitted to the African Economic Research Program, the master's program, to engage to do further studies. So Mary was pondering, because she has a small baby, the program itself requires her to actually come to Nairobi for the what we call the joint facility for electives, where all the students in the program take their electives from. Now she didn't know what to do because she can't leave her baby. She was breastfeeding. Of course, the African Economic Research Consortium, we encouraged Mary to actually bring her baby to the facility. And of course, she obliged. She brought her baby. I think very much she felt very empowered and of course, very encouraged. And so she, for the 4 months at the joint facility, she had her baby and did her classes. And she turned out very well. She passed very well. And she's now actually enrolled for a PhD, already doing her research for the PhD. Another story is of a lady called Nancy. Nancy went through the same program, starting with a collaborative master's program in economics. She did very well. She enrolled for the collaborative PhD program in economics. She also did very well. And she landed a job at the central bank in her country. And of course, she worked through the ranks. And now she is the deputy governor of the central bank in her country. Obviously, she's now very influential in the policy design and policy making in her country, especially in areas such as financial inclusion, which are very, very important for women, as much as we know that women generally find it very difficult to have access to finance. So these are some of the stories. The fact that women are underrepresented is not because women are less capable. Women face several challenges, and it's important that if we provide the kind of support that is required or necessary to remove the obstacles in the way of women, actually women can do very well, and in fact, just like anyone else. So for example, one of the things that we actually try to showcase is the fact that for someone like Nancy, who persevered from undergraduate up to becoming a deputy governor, these people actually serve as role models for other young women to follow through, and especially the women that we are working with from fragile and post-conflict countries. So we are very happy and honored by the support from the International Development Research Center in that regard. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the stories we have had today tell us a lot about the plight of women and girls, especially in Africa. There is a lot behind these powerful stories that probably we have not been able to get the depth into. But the fact is, the journey to end gender inequality started some time back. But we as researchers, as research organizations, have a very big role to play. From supporting the young adolescent girl who has dropped out of school, to the girl who is looking for a job because she has finished primary, secondary education, to the woman who is in business and trying to make a living to support her children, and those who have gone past into university and other levels of education. We need to support these people. Without research, these people are going to remain in a situation where the challenges, the constraints are going to be continuing to grow. The research we are supporting is meant to overcome some of these challenges. We work with policymakers, we work with research institutions, but above all, the power of the communities is what holds the gains that we can have in terms of creating gender equality in our communities.
What I find very interesting and profound about the stories we have heard today is that from being a girl to being a woman, there are very specific gender barriers that girls and women are facing, because we cannot treat women and girls as homogeneous. And at each and every one of those stages, we have to be very intentional about how we deal with those challenges and how we open up opportunities for women and girls. The other thing that I find very profound is, although we're talking about barriers, that some of these interventions are actually leading to very meaningful changes in the lives of women and girls. And how can we amplify those changes? Because we've heard about Maria, about Nekesa, was it Nekesa or Wekesa? We've heard about Nancy. But there are millions of other women out there. How do we take these interventions to scale? How do we use policies? How do we use the power of the stakeholders that we work with to take these to scale? Because we are still talking about 1% of those girls that make it through life. What about the other 99%? We have to be much, much more intentional.
My job is just to say thank you to everybody who was involved in organizing the Indaba this morning. First of all, the 5 researchers who came to spend their morning with us, do you mind standing for just a moment so that we can recognize you? We appreciate you. We recognize you for your work and for your commitment in the field and in the office and with the people in the communities that you work with. Thanks so much for coming and sharing with us this morning.